Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Tiffany Hunter. Welcome. I'm an energy healer in the United States. Welcome to the Life Made Easier podcast. Here you're going to find ancient wisdom with a modern approach. In each episode, we're sharing tips and tricks from the world of energy healing, designed to help your life be easier and more practical and simple ways.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Karen Janes. I'm a psychologist and energy healer in the UK. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about being balanced. So, this podcast is one that's going to be in two parts. And in today's episode, the first episode, we're going to explore from our perspective as energy healers what it means when we talk about being in balance or out of balance, and what this might look like in terms of your energy system. So once you've listened to this one, you might want to then check out part two, where we'll talk you through some more practical tips and tools for how to actually achieve that. So today we're doing the theory, and next time we'll be doing some more practical stuff.
Practical stuff. I like that. That's a technical term. Practical stuff. It's hard to do the practical stuff if you don't have some theoretical understanding and also that we don't have some shared language. So that's what we're going to try to do today. Um,
Yeah.
I think for us, the place to begin is really what do we mean when we say off balance? And it's kind of one of those things that people use a lot. They'll say, oh, I just feel off, or I just feel kind of out of whack. And we wanted to take a moment and get a little technical about what's actually happening in the body when that occurs. It's hard to fix something if we don't really understand why it's happening in the first place. So the place to begin is to understand that we're made up of three parts. We're made up of a body, a mind, and energy. All of those together creates a whole human system. And in order to be balanced, those three parts of us have to be working well together. All three of them have to be integrated and they have to be even keeled, so to speak. If we're out of if one of those are super stretched or super exaggerated, we're not going to feel so well. So they need to be roughly the same size as well. And I think the example that most people are probably very aware of is when the mind part of us gets really inflated and inflamed, and then we'll say we're stuck in our heads, or we're intellectualizing, or we've left our bodies and we can't find our feet. That's what's actually happening technically from an energy anatomy point of view. So each part needs to work together. Each part needs to play well together in the playground, and they need to flow together and they need to be roughly the same size.
But I think it's worth just mentioning here that there is something that might vary a bit for different individuals. So, although we perhaps want to think about them as being these different parts of ourselves as being balanced within each part, but also balanced with each other, what that looks like for one person might be slightly different for to what that looks like for somebody else. And I guess a very obvious example of this would be we all know that person who's really sporty and very physical in there, and then we probably all know people who are much more cerebral, intellectual type of
Hmm.
people who might be horrified at the thought of running around, doing something more energetic. Um, and so different types of people will maybe want the balance of those parts of themselves to be a little bit, not quite so perfectly even, but what needs to
But
be
natural for
balanced for
them.
you is the important part.
Yeah. Yeah, natural to them. The other thing to very much keep in mind, and this may speak to, me being an old lady, but you may have remembered the toy if you were in the States, that the Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. Humans are very much Weebles. We're not made to get into balance and stay there. We are made to sway gently off balance again. So the goal isn't to get balanced, achieve perfection, feel like we've got this handled, where everything's in control, we're okay, and we're just going to be there. It is not failure when things start to sway to the left or to the right, and the weeble in us starts to wobble. That's not success. Success is actually first and foremost recognizing when it's happening. I think that most people have that experience where you're like, wow, like I've lost my keys and can't find my water bottle and I'm late to work, and you just kind of stop for a minute and you just think, what? Gosh, I am so off. right? Success is recognizing that and recognizing that as quickly as you possibly can so that you can do something about it. Success is also having the tools to do something about it. So when you first recognize it, you think, "Oh, I'm a little off. I'm a little wobbly. Little bit of a Weeble going on here. I know what I can do." And we're gonna talk about how you know what to do because, of course, depending on which part of us is off balance, decides a lot about what best techniques we can put it back into balance again.
I just really, really want to stress that point. As you know, we're both healers, we're both clinicians, we both work with people who come to us because they're struggling, and there's a very good chance that anybody listening to this podcast, maybe you're not struggling today, but you're probably somebody who's had a sense of sometimes life is hard, and that kind of idea that the goal isn't to be perfectly balanced all the time because that's just impossible. And to just be really kind to yourself and gentle with yourself when you notice, so we can build up that toolbox of things. Oh, okay, now I can try some things. I think that trying to, as much as we can, reduce that judgment about what is it, how do we respond when we notice we're out of balance is a really good place to start, because if we start judging ourselves for not being in perfect balance, that will push us further out of balance than if we can just go, oh, how did I end up here? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, particularly if we can accept that the answer to how did I end up here was I was born a human. That's that's how I ended up here. All humans do that,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
there's no expectation
Yeah.
that that's not going to happen to us. Yeah, I think you make a really important point. I have to say, I think if you asked me, and I'm curious what you think, Karen, but if you asked me to name the one thing that will instantly put a member of the human species off balance, I would say self-recrimination and shame. What would your answer be?
Yeah. I might need to, yeah, feeling either externally or internally kind of judged. Yeah, feeling I've done something wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that feeling of shame.
yeah.
Yeah. So there's lots of, as I said, as we said, there's three different parts of us, and we can be off balance in different ways. So let's take, I think, what most people are most familiar with, which would be the physical part of us being off balance. And that could be because we've had too much caffeine, or we've exercised too much, or we've exercised too little, and we haven't had any fresh air. Those kinds of things create imbalances and instabilities in the physical system. Can you think of any other examples, Karen?
No, but it did pop into my head as you were saying that's really for me where it's so individual, because and also through our lives. So what, just to purely take something like physical movement, let's call it, what's right for you one day might, to keep you in balance or to help you come back to balance, might be different on a different day. I mean, again, obvious example of that would be if you're ill. Our body is designed to respond in a way that makes us slow down. So that's not the day to go out for your run or go to the gym or, do something really energetic. That's the day to rest. And you will
Hmm.
stand the best chance of allowing your whole system to come back into balance if you can be kind of listening to yourself and allow it to change, allow it to flux, allow it to be different. And equally when we age or what we've got going on in our lives, all those things will both affect how in or out of balance we are, but also what the best response is to that.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Okay, so moving right along, the next one is mental. And this is really going to come down, I think, to thoughts, right? Are we worrying?
Mm.
Are our thoughts running around the rabbit holes? Are we going around, the back and forth over something? Have we had an argument with somebody? Are we studying too much? Are we feeling under pressure and feeling the shame? All of those things are going to affect the mental system. And just as a side note, if I was a book, I'd put a little footnote here. I don't know, can you get like a footnote special effects noise, like boing or something? Um, I would say that you may have noticed that we're using the word mental, we're not using the word emotions. And that's in large part because emotions are they straddle, right? Emotions tend straddle the physical system and the mental system. And it's more complicated than that, of course. But for the minute, I'm talking about mental thoughts that can certainly create emotions, but they're going to create imbalances in the mental system. And can you think of anything else any
Well,
other
it was
examples
just
that might be helpful?
one thing that did come to mind was the again the kind of internal and the external. So
Mm,
we can be worrying about things in our own minds, which we may or may not share with other people, or maybe things that are actually happening or things that we're worried might happen. But there can also be stuff happening like externally, some of, which might be a bit more in our control, some of which might be completely outside our control. And so, yeah, so again, I suppose I feel like I'm being the voice of the individual differences for this podcast, um, where I'm
you
like,
wear it well.
um, thank you. Yeah, so it's kind of like yeah, that and also the way mentally, I think perhaps more than some of the other things. I don't know what you think about this, but we can get kind of a bit stuck in particular thoughts, and it's almost like there's a I think we'll talk about this more in other podcast topics, but there's a kind of a um mental kind of rumination. That's a good word, rumination. Can be quite sort of alluring in a way. We can get very stuck in that, and sometimes moving out of that imbalance uh,
Yeah.
can be tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, and so lastly, there's the energetic part of us. And that can include things like our energy system, our energy anatomy, not getting fully rested or fully resetting during sleep, having toxic or dirty, for lack of a better word right now, debris in our aura, our chakras being blocked or not spinning correctly, emotions that have been now stored in the energy system and not being released, and they're rattling around in there and causing some problems. That would be those would be examples of things that would set the energetic side of us off. And it's worth noting that all symptoms show up in the mental or physical parts of us, but the cause of those symptoms are in the mental and the physical part of us. Some imbalances cause symptoms, but you don't notice them until they hit the mental and physical part of us. But the originating imbalance is actually in the energetic system. And then, of course, there's many things that affect
Yeah.
all of those.
I'm just thinking that one of the really interesting kind of challenges that we've found as we've been, doing our podcasts is the lack of language, good language we have for the energetics, and how that is a part of us as humans that feels like it's got quite sidelined, in some cases kind of disconnected from, and not the ways that we perhaps are more aware of our energy, the energy part of us, the energy of the world, etc., is something which sort of sneaks in under the radar. It's not something we that gets commonly openly acknowledged or discussed with us when we're children in the way that the physical world and even our thoughts do, and to probably a lesser degree for many people, emotions. So I think it's always trickier when we get to this part about the energy system. And again, one of the things that can be trickier about that, which I think is just a different way of saying what you just said, Tiffany, is that the we can have a problem that originates in our physical body, in our mind, in our energy system, but we were desperately trying to rack our brains. Is there, I mean, I can't think of any way that the energetic problem shows up in a way, in a way that isn't a physical sensation. That's how we experience our energy system to a
Mm-hmm.
degree. It may be a different kind of sensation to, somebody's actually touching my body. But it's still, we feel it through our body. We feel our energy system through our body. And so that can make it quite challenging to know, well, where does this problem originate? And to even keep in mind, which is partly why we're doing this podcast, to keep in mind that sometimes a problem may be energetic in nature, but we might be having a physical or a more mental symptom that is where we identify, oh, I'm off balance, I'm kind of out of sorts today.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We really were racking our minds to come up with an energetic symptom that you would experience entirely in the energy system. And I think we didn't come up with any. We tried pretty hard. Yeah, we tried pretty
No, if
hard.
anybody thinks of one, please let us know.
Yeah, let us know. I mean, as healers, one of the things that we see a lot is what I think of as playing whack-a-mole, because you see somebody and they come with irritable bowel, and you resolve that, and then they come back with migraines, and you resolve that, and they come back with something else, and you're just playing whack-a-mole with all of these symptoms. And as soon as we see that, we know it's because the cause is in the energetic system, and it hasn't been addressed. It hasn't been addressed. And I love when I see clients showing up like that, because they've been to all these other people, and I'm sitting there thinking, "Oh, you're going to love me, and this is going to be so much fun." Because I'm going to hand you, you've been trying to solve this problem with a hammer, and you've needed a screwdriver this whole time. I can't wait to hand you the screwdriver. Because you're finally going to be able to get to the initiating cause instead of chasing all these symptoms in this game of whack-a-mole. Okay, well, now that we've gone way off into a tangent, coming back around again. So, just to acknowledge that although we are separating these things out so that we can understand them better, of course they work together. And there are situations, and in fact, I'd argue most situations affect more than one part of us at the same time. That is particularly true of trauma. Um, but it can also be something as simple as not sleeping. If we haven't enough sleep, it kind of affects all our systems. We're going to be irritable, which would be mental, and we're going to be exhausted, which is going to be physical. And the lack of sleep itself, of course, is an energetic issue. So they really do they all do to go together.
I wonder if it's worth actually just like even because I think sometimes with the when we get talking about the energy system, we can end up being because of what we were talking about in terms of the lack of language and familiarity with that part of ourselves. I think we can it's easy to not be so specific. So one way that lack of sleep can affect our energy system is the part of us that really does the good, deep self-healing work is really happening when we sleep and is works at its best when we get enough good quality sleep. So although
Hmm.
the sleeping feels like a kind of physical activity in a way, or a pause in physical activity, I suppose, that part of us that really takes care of, that part of us that is always responding to pathogens in our system or fighting things off. And that's partly why when our sleep is disrupted or more limited or problematic in some way, we're likely to get more ill. And that's where it's kind of, we separate things out into these three parts because it helps us to think about it and understand it, but actually it's so interconnected how it, as Tiffany said, how it sort of how it impacts.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. So it may surprise you that, Karen and I have both been doing this work between the two of us for over 40 years, and yet only recently did we sit down and rack our brains to try to find a symptom that's in the energy system only, or noticed in the energy system. Like, wow, seems like an obvious question to ask. But the reason it hasn't come up for us is because when we're working with people, we are seeing it directly in the energy. So, in an ideal world, we are correcting those imbalances for our clients before they show up as a symptom, right? So, obviously, most people that walk in the door have something that they need fixed. right? They have a symptom or they have a diagnosis. But in an ideal world, you get them to a place where they're coming up for maintenance. And that maintenance includes just fixing things that they may not even, hopefully, don't even realize are happening because it hasn't taken hold enough to show up as a symptom that feels tangible, that feels experiential for them. And thinking that through got us thinking about how it might be super helpful to share this little piece of information with y'all that we actually experience the energetic part of us as having as much substance and taking up as much space and having as much presence as the physical body, right? So for us, these three parts of us really do take up space, and I think you're probably familiar with that a little bit of conflict to say, well, yes, obviously the physical body takes up space, but you're probably comfortable with the idea that the mind does, right? Because if you think about the mind is actually completely invisible. You know, if I asked somebody, where is your mind? You might point to your head, but it's not really in your head. It's actually not in your brain. It doesn't actually exist. You know, it exists someplace, but it is a parallel experience to your physical body. But it's still real to you, right? It's still real to most people. You know what your mind feels like. Well, we want to support you to extend that a little bit further and include your energetic anatomy in the same way, right? So your physical body, your mind, and the energy that frequencies and vibrations that make up your mind are really substantial, and so are the energy anatomy and systems that you have as well. And if you can really think about those three things as equal, having equal gravitas, all of this information will probably be a little easier to digest and use.
Yeah, I think some of it is about sort of just talking about it. I mean, we have to use our minds to understand something. So we have to kind of put, some kind of words or whatever to what we're trying to understand, I guess. And I think that's such a good point, that our minds don't have a physical substance, yet I don't know anybody who says minds don't exist. Yeah, but I mean, if we think about it in terms of what a surgeon does, a surgeon works on our physical body, and whilst there are surgeries that are aimed to affect something in the mind, I don't think a surgeon would be claiming to be removing or altering a part of the mind. They might do something to your brain, which they hope will then impact how your mind is working or coping or whatever. But it's not actually your mind they're working on. But the other thing that popped into my head listening to you talk, Tiffany, was, one part of our energy system which people are perhaps more commonly familiar with than some other parts is our aura. And scientists these days will have increasingly sophisticated instruments to measure what we might, if we're being more scientific about it, call some kind of biofield, bioelectromagnetic, whatever name you might come across for that. A part of us, a part of every living thing that extends beyond our physical body. So when we're talking about being in balance or being out of balance, remembering that we're a little bit bigger than our physical body, we extend a bit beyond our
Yes.
skin, I think can be helpful, because even just taking that into, now I feel like we started this podcast saying we weren't going to get into the practical stuff, but I'm kind of mindful that just being aware that we have an energy system can help us to consider that there are other aspects to being out of balance or imbalance that might be useful to know about, and then be helpful in some way for us to be sort of back more into balance.
Yes. 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 Absolutely. Just to summarize a bit, we're hoping that we've given you all a good, specific, usable model for understanding how you're built up and how, when you don't feel great, when you feel off balance, what may be actually happening inside of yourself, and what's gone wrong, so that you can reverse engineer it and figure out how to address it.
just to say, if nothing else, we hope that you'll take away from this the idea that it's normal to get out of balance. It's normal
Mm.
to wobble, to have things to be affected by what's happening inside yourself, what's happening in your life, what's happening in the world around you. And it's so the goal very much isn't to be perfectly in balance all the time, like some sort of superhuman being. And that we can, by learning more about these different parts of ourselves, it can get easier to identify when you're off balance, and then gather some tools to help you with that.
Yeah, and remember, no matter what hole you're standing into that you need to climb out of, you will absolutely dig further if you start to punish yourself, blame yourself, or start to criticize yourself. So take a deep breath, understand where you are, and start. Remember, success is not going off balance. Success is recognizing it and knowing how to get yourself back where you want to get. All right, guys, thank you so much. We'll see you on the other side where we're going to get a little bit more practical.
Thanks for joining us. See you next time. Bye.
Hi, I'm Carol Smith, the producer of the Life Made Easier podcast. We hope today's episode gave you some meaningful tools and takeaways to help make your life feel a little lighter. You've reached the end of this episode, but not the end of the ways that you can support us. Please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, follow us on social media, and check out our Patreon for extra content and ways you can go deeper with us. There's also a whole library of episodes waiting for you to help increase your energy intelligence. Take care, and we'll see you on the next Life Made Easier.